And I know that's counterintuitive to some people, but the parallels are actually pretty striking if you think about it. Democrat governors, when you look at George Wallace, he resisted desegregation. Gavin Newsom is resisting deportations. George Wallace wanted segregated cities. Gavin Newsom wants sanctuary cities. George Wallace stood in the school door blocking the way. Gavin Newsom is blocking the ICE vans. It's the same Democrat governor playbook. You dodge the feds, you rally the radicals, and most importantly of all, you do it in front of the cameras.
You know, it really is in the Democrats' DNA to stand with un-American criminals.
Let's get ready to rumble! You can't handle the truth.
Hi, I'm Pastor Marty. Welcome to the Afternoon Drive. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and once you are, smack the bell, click the word all. That will give you notification of my rants, my ravings, my undeniably flawless reasonings. Please like and share this video. It's the only way that we get the word out that we're here. Thank you so much for watching and being a part of the Afternoon Drive.
We should have learned the lesson back in 2020. Absolutely, there was righteous outrage over what happened to George Floyd, but that never means that you can support or be quiet if there's destruction or rioting and destroying and looting and those kinds of things.
If Senator Fetterman or anybody else is concerned with law and order, we should be looking at one of the most law-breaking agencies and administrations that we've seen in the United States.
And it's sad that Justin Fetterman has to be the voice of reason within the Democratic Party. He bends over backwards to say, we are for peaceful protest. What we are not for is anarchy. What we are not for is looting. Ripping off an Apple store is not somehow standing with the migrants, man, that we can be a sanctuary city, man. It's about crime. Waving a foreign flag on top of a burning car is not protest. It is not First Amendment protected speech. It is an act of war. And these people need to be treated as such. But AOC refers to the president as the criminal, not the actual criminals. This constant dodge and deflect and try to change the narrative. And it is exactly why this whole issue is literally and figuratively blowing up on the Democrats. The American people, after the summer of love with George Floyd, though they didn't want to see what happened to George Floyd happen, they also didn't want to see their cities burned to the ground. And all forms of wanton lawlessness just excused by Joe Biden and Democratic mayors and governors and the whole defund the police movement. And Governor Tim Walz's wife saying she loved the smell of burning tires because that was the smell of freedom, as people, small businessmen, lost their livelihood, their life savings, and everything they had. And nobody was arrested. Nobody prosecuted. You think the rioters in the streets of Los Angeles right now are banking on that? And I would dare say that the only reason that there are people in Los Angeles right now being arrested and actually being prosecuted, you have the LADA say we're going to nail these people, is because of Donald Trump and Pam Bondi. That's it. They know this is a losing issue for them. And to the American people, they got to try to sell, we are for law and order. We are for law and order. AOC. How can you say the Democrats are not for law and order? It's not our fault every teenager that throws a brick. Oh, honey, there's a lot more than just teenagers throwing bricks going on here.
What's happening right now is very different than anything we've seen before. On Saturday morning, when federal agents jumped out of an unmarked van near a Home Depot parking lot, they began grabbing people, a deliberate targeting of a heavily Latino suburb. A similar scene played out when a clothing company was raided downtown. In other actions, a U.S. citizen, 9 months pregnant, was arrested. A 4-year-old girl taken. Families separated. Friends quite literally disappearing.
So Governor Newsom actually now accuses Donald Trump and ICE of basically Nazi Gestapo tactics of just rounding up people on the street because they're the wrong color. Funny how he leaves out certain facts. Fact. The woman with the child was not arrested. She was detained. You know, when police come on a scene, some of you have seen this even played out in movies where an off-duty or undercover police officer is in a situation and he has to draw his weapon and he has to fire. And the police arrive. Even that officer who was actually performing his duty has to surrender his weapon, put his hands behind his head until his identity can be established. When police, in this case ICE, come onto a scene where there are known illegals to be there that need to be deported and they have a deported order on, they simply round up everybody that's there until they establish identity. That's all that happened to this woman. She was detained. And then the whole concept of families being separated, again, it's meant to wrench your heartstrings. If you or I were driving in our car under the influence and our child was in the back seat and the police rolled up on us, gave us a breathalyzer and said, "You're under the influence, you're under arrest," our child would not go to jail with us. We would be separated. These are illegal criminals being separated. Let's not forget that this is not the Gestapo going in and just ripping families apart. These people committed crimes.
Sanctuary cities and states will no longer be allowed to shield illegal criminals from deportation. Just take a look at some of the illegal monsters who were taken off the streets in Los Angeles in recent days. A Vietnamese national, a known gang member with a conviction for second-degree murder. A Mexican national with convictions for child molestation who was armed with a dangerous weapon and had previous arrests for robbery and domestic violence. A Filipino national with convictions of rape, assault, burglary, and theft. A Mexican national convicted of statutory rape, narcotics violations, and hit and run. A Nicaraguan national with convictions for domestic violence and hit and run, and a previous arrest for willful cruelty to a child. And an illegal alien from Mexico who was arrested after allegedly throwing a Molotov cocktail at law enforcement officers during the Paramount riots on Saturday. He is now being charged with attempted murder.
The White House press secretary setting the record straight. These people that are being rounded up from the Home Depot that the Democrats are bending over backwards to defend, these are not just people who are here illegally, although that is a crime. I've explained this a dozen times, that Trump's emphasis, ICE's emphasis right now, is to go after the illegal aliens who are here, who are also committing other heinous acts and crimes while here. That's what this is. But of course, the Democrats see this as an opportunity, a political opportunity. That's why they're complaining about the troops being there. They were hoping, they're salivating that they could have a Tiananmen Square on the TV screen that they could use as an issue. But Donald Trump wisely has deployed the National Guard to federal buildings to guard them. The only way the protesters come in contact with the National Guard is if they try to overtake the National Guard to try to burn down a building, and the National Guard's not letting that happen. And the Marines, they're very visible, but they're training. And they're training out in the open where everybody can see them train. And you know what happened after the Marines were there for 24 hours? The anarchists in the middle of the night went home. They went home. The Marine presence was a deterrent. This is the stroke of genius of Donald Trump. Vivek Ramaswamy, who is running for governor in the state of Ohio, really put this in order as to what Governor Newsom and the Democrats actually are.
All right, so Vivek, what are you seeing in Los Angeles that makes you think the Democrats care about law and order?
Well, they don't, Jesse. That's clear. But I'll tell you this. I know Gavin Newsom. I actually happen to like him as a person. The reality is he's not going to like what I have to say on this, which is that his behavior is starting to resemble that of another Democratic governor from U.S. history by the name of George Wallace, who was the governor of Alabama, who famously stood in the way of federal desegregation. And in 1963, President John F. Kennedy had to deploy the National Guard of Alabama just like President Trump is doing today. And I know that's counterintuitive to some people, but the parallels are actually pretty striking if you think about it. Democrat governors, when you look at George Wallace, he resisted desegregation. Gavin Newsom is resisting deportations. George Wallace wanted segregated cities. Gavin Newsom wants sanctuary cities. George Wallace stood in the school door blocking the way. Gavin Newsom is blocking the ICE vans. It's the same Democrat governor playbook. You dodge the feds, you rally the radicals, and most importantly of all, you do it in front of the cameras. Because what they were both doing is really carving their Democratic primary path for their presidential ambitions. And Jesse, you can mark my words on this one. Gavin Newsom's presidential ambitions are going to end in the same place that George Wallace's did, in the dustbins of history where it belongs. That's just the truth.
Boom.